Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers for March 22nd, 2011, the 32nd legislative day of the 2011 session of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Scott Slade. Coming up at tonight's program, another step toward final passage of Sunday package alcohol sales as the bill clears its House committee. Amidst Georgia's water woes, the Senate approves a plan to study the amount of water flowing out of the state. We continue our leadership interview series tonight, and Wendy Lawson is talking to House Majority Leader Larry O'Neill about the state health care compact that passed on crossover day. And we'll be talking about high-tech jobs in Georgia. I'll be joined on set by Stephen Fleming, Vice President of the Enterprise Innovation Institute at Georgia Tech, and Tino Mantella, President and CEO of Technology Association of Georgia, a technology industry development group. All that and more is coming up tonight on Primetime Lawmakers. But first, after seeming to stall in the Senate last month, Sunday's sales legislation is moving smoothly on the House side. And Wendy Lawson joins us live from the state capitol with today's action at Senate Bill 10. Good evening, Wendy.
And a good evening to you as well, Scott. In a meeting that lasted less than 10 minutes this afternoon, the House Regulated Industries Committee gave SB 10 a thumbs up. Much like the Senate committee where the measure began, there were no voices of opposition heard today. Representatives of Kroger, the National Federation of Independent Business, and the Georgia Association of Convenience Stores all said that they favored the bill, but only the Kroger lobbyist actually went to the podium to make a case. Representative Billy Mitchell said it was time for the long-time debate to end by allowing voters to decide whether liquor should be offered by retailers in their areas on Sundays.
For the life of me, I can't understand why it's okay for a consumer to be at home on Sunday, decide that they want some alcohol, they can get in their vehicle, go to certain athletic venues, bars, restaurants, consume all the alcohol they can purchase, get back in their car and drive home. But it's not okay for a consumer to be at home on a Sunday and say, I want some alcohol, get in their car, drive to the package store across the street from the restaurant, bar, to purchase it, to drive home to consume it. For that reason, Mr. Chair, when it's appropriate, I'd like to make a motion that we do pass.
And SB 10 cleared the House Regulated Industries Committee with only one dissenting vote. It now moves to the House Rules Committee and could be up for a vote by the full House by Monday. The Senate today agreed to encourage the Department of Natural Resources to study how much water is leaving the state. Senator Jeff Mullis sponsors Senate Resolution 233. He says 725 million gallons of water are diverted from his North Georgia district each day.
As you know, water is a very important issue in the state of Georgia, and fortunately, my district has lots of it. In fact, if I go to my front porch and pour a glass of water off the front porch, and that's all I'd be doing off the front porch, it would go to the Tennessee River. So this resolution asks the Department of Natural Resources and the Georgia Environmental Facilities Authority to study all the water that leaves Georgia and goes somewhere else, and the reservoirs and the quarries, the rock quarries that are abandoned, and how much water they store, all that information to help us in the future deal with our water issues. I do believe that conservation is the number one thing we should do, but we also have to have other resolutions.
SR 233 passed with no opposition. It moves to the House. Governor Nathan Deal told the Water Supply Task Force yesterday that their agencies need to work together to gather public input and create trust in the statewide water management plan that will receive a $300 million investment over the next 4 years.
I do not want us to get in the business of being the water czars of the state of Georgia. I think that would be a mistake. I think we need to make sure that local communities have the buy-in. But as you know, they sometimes lack the ability to do the planning that is necessary for projects. And of course, sometimes they lack the upfront resources to be able to get those projects moving. I see that as a role that the state and your agencies can play in that process. These are issues that will not be resolved in the short term. Many of them will be long-term solutions. But we put off beginning that process far too long. Now's the time to do it, and I appreciate the fact that you're all willing to participate in that.
In other news, the 45-day window provided for early precinct voting in Georgia could be cut down to 3 weeks. As Representative Mark Hamilton explained to the Senate State and Local Governmental Operations Committee this afternoon, that's before the committee gave HB 92 a do-pass recommendation.
Currently, 10 to 15% of all votes take place by mail-in ballots. 50% of the votes actually occur on election day. This bill does not really affect those two pieces. About 35 to 40% of the normal vote is what we call in-person, no excuse early voting. Presently, it allows for 45 days. What this bill does is it takes that 45 days and makes it 3 weeks plus one required Saturday. And the only exception is in those occasions where there is no federal or state candidate on the ballot, then that Saturday is exempt from municipalities. And I think it's a good sound bill that accomplishes a lot of things. And I'll also say we have a letter of support from the League of Women Voters of Georgia, which you know is certainly no partisan issue. They say, for those that think that it disenfranchises people, they state specifically that they support this bill. This bill will have an impact of unifying the early voting process and does not limit citizens' right to vote in any way.
Although there is no Senate Democratic caucus position on the bill, the two opposing votes today came from Democrats.
Opposed?
Including Senate Democratic Caucus Chair Doug Stoner, who says any cost savings gained by reducing the voting window will be offset by reducing the number of voters at the polls.
I just don't see why we need to reduce from 45 days as it stands now.
Representative Hamilton says the measure provides no cost savings to the state, but could reduce some local election budgets by as much as 50%. He said, for instance, that DeKalb County could save about $80,000, but that county government opposes HB 92. The Senate State and Local Governmental Affairs Committee approved the measure by a vote of 5-2 and sent it to the Senate Rules Committee. The Senate revisited the issue of how islands, those are unincorporated pieces of land surrounded on all sides by incorporated cities and county land. They may be annexed after that measure was voted down yesterday. Here's Senator Steve Gooch urging his colleagues to reconsider House Bill 80.
What we'd like to do is send it back to Rules and recommit it to committee. It'll go back to SLOGO. We'll work on the bill, bring it back out, and answer some questions and concerns that some of you had yesterday. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for all of us to discuss any issues you have with the bill and bring it back before the end of session.
But the Senate Democratic whip urged the Senate to let the matter die for this year.
I hope that we can move on to other efforts this session. And another bill like this, if they need to introduce it next session, can be introduced. It's not a dead issue. But let's move on from the day this bill was overwhelmingly defeated the other day. So I urge your defeat of this motion.
By a vote of 34-14, the Senate approved reconsideration of the bill and sent HB 80 back to the Rules Committee. And while we're on the subject of islands, the Senate also passed a measure urging the Department of Transportation to erect a sound wall near one Georgia island.
I-95, which runs through Glenn County, was widened, and that includes a portion of it which runs across Blythe Island. And when it did, it brought the interstate a lot closer to some of the residences there. And this resolution asked the DOT to reconsider its decision not to put some sound barriers along the interstate there. Barriers were put along some other residential sections, and you know there's some around Atlanta as well.
SR 233 was approved by a vote of 51-1, and it was sent to the House. Meanwhile, the House Economic Development Committee approved a resolution urging Congress to deepen the Savannah Harbor.
I would submit to you that arguably this is the most important economic development project in the modern history of our state. It's too simple to say that if we don't do this, we will lose, because there's no such thing in this business as standing still. If we don't do it, we're moving backwards. We have to go forward with this. All we're doing is encouraging the federal government to allocate the money for the deepening of the Savannah Harbor. You know, we're trying to go from 42 feet to 48 feet so that we can handle these post-Panamanic ships that are going to be coming in as soon as the Panama Canal is deepened in 2014.
SR 312 was given a do-pass recommendation and sent to the House Rules Committee. And finally tonight, passage in the House of a measure allowing nonpartisan school board elections in one district was less notable for the content of SB 195 than for the fact that a freshman legislator presented a bill without being hazed.
It is a bill simply dealing with Brantley County and Brantley County only. It affects no other counties in the state. They desire to make their school board a nonpartisan election. I spoke with the chairman and the board members. They're all 100% unanimous, and I would ask for your favorable consideration on this vote.
You don't appear to have any questions.
I yield the well. Thank you.
I don't know how you did that on your first bill. Somebody tell him that running is not allowed on the floor of the House, especially away from the well.
Who knows, maybe the members of the House were asleep, but the representative was spared that usual barrage of strange questions. SB 195 passed the House by a vote of 148 to 9, marking final passage. Reporting live from the Capitol, I'm in Wandy Lawson for Primetime Lawmakers.
That was quite a moment. Thanks for that update, Wandy. I'm curious, before you leave, about the change to early voting you've been talking about this evening. If HB 92 becomes law, how soon would voters see that change?
Well, we're not quite sure about that, but because Georgia has to prove compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act every time a voting law is changed, that measure would have to be considered by the Department of Justice. And then if it receives federal approval, Representative Hamilton told me that the 3-week voting period could begin as early as November of 2012.
All right, the next presidential election. Thanks, Wandy. In tonight's leadership segment, Wandy Lawson sits down with House Majority Leader Larry O'Neill. She began by asking about the Interstate Health Care Compact approved by the House on crossover day, and critics claims that HB 461 is nothing more than a protest of the federal health care plan.
Federal program, as we all know and must admit, is in constitutional litigation as we speak. Depending on the outcome of that litigation, we may or may not have it. And to wait and find out the outcome of that and then have no other plan to take care of the health needs of all of Georgia, to me, would be a pretty irresponsible sort of waiting on the sky to fall attitude here. I mean, we're moving forward with as many viable, economically feasible alternatives for our citizens as we can compile, and trying to keep the politics out of it. I mean, healthcare is not political. But it's very, very important to every Georgian, and it's important to all of us here that want to deal with Georgia's issues responsibly. I think I certainly see so in the leadership that I deal with, both parties for that matter.
The House also approved an extension on the jet fuel tax exemption for Delta Airlines. This drew a lot of complaint from the Clayton County delegation that says it's already losing millions of dollars in tax revenue. How do you kind of balance that argument against perhaps what is the greater good for the state?
You know, the argument was made they made $500 million last year. Well, if fuel price jet fuel costs go up $1 a gallon, their profits are gone, because they buy 500 million gallons. So that it's that volatile in that industry, and other airlines they compete with that fly out of the other hubs, Texas and Minneapolis and the other ones that were named in the debate, many of them paid no fuel tax, sales tax in those areas. They're exempt entirely from those. So they're pricing tickets based on nothing. Delta's having to price them here, based on the circumstances as they are now. We wish we could give them more. We wish we could cover all the other airlines. We wish we could give every inducement to get as many job-creating businesses in here as we can, but we just can't afford it anymore and take care of the core issues of government. And we thought this was a reasonable phase-out where Delta will have time to adjust their fuel forward purchase contracts and adjust their budget accordingly. And they're getting about a third of what they would have gotten total had we extended the extension. But it gives them a chance to have the say-so how they're going to deal with it collectively. And to argue that they're so profitable they shouldn't get anything, I'm delighted they're profitable. There's nothing evil about profit in free markets and in a capitalistic society. It's their profitability and others that are getting us out of this horrible recession that we're in. We want to do everything we can to encourage business profitability. That's what America's all about.
Another issue of taxation, those recommendations from the Tax Reform Council. I'm wondering, where does that legislation stand in the final days of this session?
We have, I think, managed all of the measures that we really had to get done this year that were absolutely imperative that we got done. Hope Scholarship, the immigration issue, and the budget. As far as the House is concerned, other than conference committee and finalization, we have dealt with those three main issues. We've dealt with our normal income tax update bills and we've done all of our shoring up in our tax code. Those are the things that were essential that we just had to get done constitutionally and practically for the state. We finished all of that in the first 30 days, and what we've done is manage it accordingly. We were not under the 30-day pressure to deal with the tax council recommendations, other than to have introduced it in this session, which we have introduced their recommendations. And we have given ourselves the time that we need, and we desperately need, to completely embrace all these recommendations, keeping in mind that it took some of the most brilliant people in Georgia 7 or 8 months to come up with the recommendations. To expect us to digest that in less than 5 weeks and move ahead with a plan that's going to impact literally every single family, child, woman, man in Georgia is way, way too ambitious, and I think would be irresponsible if we didn't take the necessary time to analyze each and every single element of that plan before we move on it.
You mentioned that most of the major legislation has already made its way through this General Assembly. I'm sure you're not going to be putting your feet up in the last few days of the session, though. So what are kind of the procedures that are going to take place in the final days?
This will be a very, very busy committee week. And that's what we just met with all of our chairmen about, is trying to get, we have 33 committees in the House that now all of a sudden have 140 new bills that they're getting today, mainly today and 2 days ago. They all came over suddenly like we send to the Senate. I'm not saying that's unfair, that's just the nature of the system. And we want to do a thorough job of vetting these bills. We've not seen them before. We've been busy with House bills. They've been busy with Senate bills. They haven't seen ours. So we now have 10 days instead of 30 days like we did for House bills to vet 140 Senate bills through our committee process. And we will get all those bills assigned into committee this week and hopefully well within the committee process, either passed or at least heard once this week. And if they take further hearings, that'll be happening next week.
Do we have any preview of when the General Assembly might adjourn sine die?
The quicker we get out of here, the cheaper it's going to be on the taxpayers, but we're going to do things responsibly. If I had to guess, it would be in the second week of April that we sine die. And especially since this is the first year, none of the bills that are left over die unless they've been voted down. So they'll still be here next year, and it's not the end of the world if they have to wait another year to pass. Most people in Georgia don't think we need 100 new laws every year. They'd rather us have about 3 less laws every year than any new ones anyway. So as long as we deal with what we have responsibly, then I think we need to get on out of here, especially this year because we're going to be coming back for reapportionment anyway. And that's another initiative on its own, but that's for after we finish up our business here. So my guess would be second week in April.
And as of this afternoon, we know when the legislature will adjourn. The House and Senate decided that sine die will be on April 14th. Representative Larry O'Neill is the House Majority Leader. He represents portions of Houston County. After this short break, we'll be talking high-tech jobs in Georgia with Stephen Fleming of the Enterprise Innovation Institute at Georgia Tech and Tino Mantella of the Technology Association of Georgia. So stay with us. And welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. High-tech industry and the jobs they create are an important part of Georgia's economy. Companies like Delta Airlines, UPS, NCR are headquartered in Georgia, while GE, Kia, Gulfstream, and others have a strong Georgia presence, employing thousands of workers. AT&T's wireless division is headquartered in Atlanta and announced Sunday it plans to acquire T-Mobile. An entire aerospace industry has sprung up around Robins Air Reserve Base in Warner Robins to serve the needs of the Air Force. And only last week, The House voted to extend Delta's jet fuel tax exemption for another 2 years. Leadership says tax exemption is an important tool to keep Delta headquartered in Georgia. Also, the General Assembly's radar, a resolution to create a strategic plan to create and grow high technology jobs in the state. SR 68 has passed the Senate and is awaiting committee assignment in the House. I'm joined this evening on set by representatives from two groups that have advancement of technology at heart. Stephen Fleming is the Vice President of the Enterprise Innovation Institute at Georgia Tech. And Tino Mantella is the President and CEO of the Technology Association of Georgia, TAG. It's great to have you with us this evening.
Great to be here.
High-tech jobs. Learn how to do something hard and people will pay you to do it.
That is absolutely accurate. Preferably do it at Georgia Tech.
Well, okay. What do we mean by high-tech jobs in this context?
There's actually a lot of jobs that fit into high-tech. I mean, everyone thinks a high-tech job is working at a Google or working at Apple or working at IBM. And all of those have major operations in Georgia. But there's a lot of other things. Over at Fort Gordon, next to Augusta, the federal government is putting 4,000 cryptographers into Fort Gordon, where they're going to be working on signal intercepts for national security. There's metal fabrication facilities in this state where people are running computer-controlled milling machines and laser-operated welders. That's a high-tech job. Now, it's not necessarily working for Facebook. But these are good jobs. They pay good wages. They require skill sets that take some time to learn. You have to dig into it in your schooling. You have to dig into it in your apprenticeship, in your early career. But once you've got those skills, that's a very valuable set of skills to take into the job market.
High-tech industry obviously has to be here for high-tech jobs. You know, what's the atmosphere in Georgia for that?
Well, it's strong. We were recognized as the #1 state in the nation for entrepreneurship. Out of each month, 500 people start businesses that are not all in technology, but 500 out of 100,000 start businesses. The normal average for the rest of the country is 320, so we're primed for that. We have a great airport, we have a strong port, we have great universities, so there's a number of things going on that make it positive, and the salaries are very good. The average salary is over $80,000, which is twice the amount that the norm is for the state of Georgia.
I would think that would have a great multiplier effect in any community that attracts those jobs, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
As far as numbers are concerned, you know, where are we there? I mean, are there huge numbers of openings in Georgia? What room do we have to grow here?
So there's basically 250,000 technology jobs in Georgia, technologists, and 13,000 technology companies, which put us about 10th in the nation. And we continue to grow, even during the recession where there was obviously a decline of 10% in unemployment. The technology community remained stable. So it's strong, there's opportunities, there's new companies emerging. It's working in Stephen's area and ATDC and other programs that provide great opportunities for people to come in and get involved in.
And Stephen, from your office at Georgia Tech, what are the employees knocking on your door saying, we need more of X, Y, Z?
We actually have employers doing precisely that right now. We have, there's a local company, SecureWorks, which has just been bought by Dell Computer, and they say they need 200 security information technology professionals for internet security, protecting primarily corporate customers against internet viruses, worms, things like that. General Electric Energy, GE Energy, has come to town, and they are putting 400 engineering jobs up in Marietta to work on smart grid, you know, updating the power grid to handle clean energy sources and so forth. So other than that, healthcare software, we've got 150 companies in this city that build healthcare software, and the whole area of clean tech in general is growing very rapidly. So those are skills that you know, we turn out graduates, and they're turning down multiple job offers.
You start with heavy math here, don't you, for all these things?
You got to take calculus.
Okay. You're about to add something, Tino?
Well, we do primary research each year. We surveyed this past year over 100 technology decision makers, and the #1 job that they need are application developers, and the #1 job that's most difficult to fill is application education developers. So there's areas of opportunity. Right now, we do a report each month called Skill Proof, and there's about 5,000 jobs that can't be filled, which makes it a challenge because we want to keep the businesses in Georgia, and we have to have that talent to fill those positions.
The state's responsibility in all this is SR 68. We mentioned this Science and Technology Strategic Initiative Joint Study Commission, a good start here, or a good way to continue the momentum?
Yeah, we've been driving that initiative, and to our knowledge, there's never been a true strategic plan in the state of Georgia for science and technology. So we think that once there's a commission formed and there's leadership that goes out and interviews our leadership in technology, that there'll be outcomes that'll benefit the state. For example, we have very strong clusters. Stephen can tell you this as well, but health information technology, we're #1 in the nation in that. Financial technologies, information security, IT communication, or communication clusters. And these clusters create great opportunities to stimulate jobs because there's competition. It also calls for more resources. And so we're really very well positioned in some of these technology leadership. We think that technology is going to lead this state out of the recession.
What will this commission do to help that along? Will it just focus the energy in one place instead of it scattered all over the place?
Yeah, there's, when you form a commission, you'll have leadership from both public and private side. And they'll go out and they'll interview leaders from all across the state, and they'll come back with recommendations. And then from that, there'll be a plan created, and really a roadmap or a compass, I think now would be more accurate point, that will be formed from that, and there'll be plans, whether how much resources would be needed from the state, from individuals, from corporations, how we can solve some of our challenges like more venture capital, more angel investment in our state. So there'll be lots of things coming out of that which will ultimately benefit the state of Georgia.
Yeah, as far as the financial climate is concerned, how can Georgia improve that?
Well, money has been tight in the financial sector for years. It has gotten better than it was a few years ago. Georgia has been lagging. We don't have a lot of venture capital in our state. When you're looking at the sort of very risky, very early stage capital that is put to work in a brand new company, most of that money of the venture investment in Georgia, 88 cents on that dollar comes from outside the state. Only 12 cents comes from within Georgia. And what that means is, first, it's harder and more expensive for our young companies to raise money. The second order effect is when they do find money in Boston or find money in California, sometimes they leave. And so that means that we've created an enterprise and created the intellectual property and created the germ of an idea that goes off, has 10 jobs here, but they have 400 jobs in California.
Is the way a pension fund set up in Georgia, the way they invest, that's a big amount of money.
Yeah,
is that a problem?
We actually have the only state pension fund in the country that does not invest in what's called alternative assets, and alternative assets includes things like venture capital. So if the state were to change that, it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to magically make a bunch of startups appear, but it's one tool in the toolkit that most states have, and Georgia doesn't have that tool.
In the few seconds we have left, Tino, tax environment, tax reform obviously is making its way through, sales tax initiatives perhaps on inputs in industry. Will that help high tech?
It will. We surveyed our companies, and they came back, and there were certain things that there was a tax commission. We talked about commissions earlier that studied all the issues, and they got a lot of feedback, and they came back with a plan, and the plan is strong. I think A.D. Fraser and that team did an excellent job of really vetting all the issues and bringing them forth. But there are, one of the key things is reduce the corporate tax, reduce the income tax from 6% to 4%. That will help businesses. They're all for that, and I think it's an opportunity for Georgia. And when we look around at the other states that are some of our competitors, they don't have income tax, so we're really disadvantaged by that.
Okay, well, let's train more people to do something hard and get them paid for it. I'm looking forward to the TAG's State of the Industry report coming out soon, too. We'll get some highlights on that soon.
Thank you. Yeah, it'll be out tomorrow.
Terrific. Thanks for both for joining us. We sure appreciate you being here. And coming up tomorrow on Primetime Lawmakers, we'll continue our leadership interview series. Amandi Lawson will talk with Senate Democratic leader Robert Brown, plus in-depth analysis on important legislative issues and the latest Capitol news. That's tomorrow night at 7. If you'd like to see a repeat of this broadcast, Primetime Lawmakers can be seen at 5:30 tomorrow morning. And coming up next, Bert Wolf, Travels and Traditions. Tonight, Bert explores German immigration to the USA. Bert Wolf is next here in GPB. And that's our broadcast for this 32nd Legislative Day of the 2011 session. Thanks to our guests for joining us tonight. For Wandy Lawson and the whole Primetime Lawmakers team, I'm Scott Slade. We'll see you tomorrow night. Have a good night.
This is a GPB original production.